Kara Adcock. Unit title, Polar Bears. 5th grade, Fall 2016. Components of what was learned. Students have learned about conversion. Students learned how inches, feet, yards, and miles all relate to each other. Through different activities, they get to see and expand on each measurement, starting from inches, then to feet, then to yards, and then to miles, and so forth. In science, students will learn about the producers, consumers, and decomposers. They will also learn how each one of these things rely on the other one. Students will also learn about photosynthesis, being that plants are producers, so therefore plants have to undergo photosynthesis, and they will learn about that chemical reaction and how plants gain their energy and what kind of inputs are being put into the plant and the outputs of the plant. Also, students will learn about different ecosystems, being that producers, consumers, and decomposers are all part of the ecosystem. They will learn how each one of these impacts that system. Also, in English language arts, students will learn about transition words. They will learn how to put each transition word at the beginning of each paragraph, and they will learn that transition words are used to help keep the story going and add a nice flow to the story. Well, in order to do these stories, they're going to research an ethnic group. And within that ethnic group, they will learn about their ecosystem and what they do and different components of it. And then they will also be able to tell a story from the polar bear's perspective, being that this unit is about polar bears. You're going to take the polar bear out of its ecosystem in Antarctica and then put it somewhere, for instance, like North Carolina. And then after they do their research, students will then be able to put their story into an essay format. The activities, as I mentioned before about the English language arts activity, where the students will be researching and gathering and different information, and they will also be able to research a variety of art forms which are important to that culture of that ethnic group that they are researching. They will also be able to see and relate the different relationships between ethnic groups, between the presentations and doing the art projects. Another great activity within this unit was the polar bear tracks. They actually got to measure their own feet, put them in groups of 4. Each student was measured twice, once for each foot, and then the group would add their feet in inches together and then convert that to the measurement of feet. And after that, they would then take those measurements in front of the class, and then they would add those the measurements in feet to yards and to miles and so forth. And then eventually they got to see how the relation between miles that they had on their own 2 little feet can relate to how far a polar bear travels. The standard course of study in each one of these, English language arts, I had 2 standards that were incorporated, both writing standards. The math obviously would be just the conversion, and then the science had different about producers and consumers and photosynthesis and the ecosystem. And within social studies, they got to see how the ethnic groups can then tie in to the English language arts side by writing about it. They got to know about how what they do affects the environment and how the ethnic group plays a huge part within the ecosystem. And then technology was used as a learning tool, whereas dance was used to incorporate memorization to help memorize the inches and the feet and the yards. And then also guidance was actually pretty interesting because we did a stress activity within the math with conversion, because conversion can be a little bit challenging. So students need to learn to relax and just breathe and be able to continue on the path and know that they can conquer anything. And music, it was that students had to concentrate on the lyrics in order to make relationships and to actually hear vocabulary and being able to catch that beat in order to make the connections further down the road. Theater was used twice within my unit because, well, for in the ecosystem we actually created backdrops, and then for theater they had to use their posture, they had to be able to articulate their words, and they had to use volume when giving their presentation. Health was also used because for stress management, and then for actually physical activity. We went out into the track, and students got to walk a mile because that's what their conversions as a class added up to. So they went and walked a mile, and then that would help us lead into next week doing distance and speed and that kind of stuff. The activity I chose to do was within the English language arts activity was actually the art portion of it. The students got to research an ethnic group and then create a visual representation of what was a useful art form or a useful tool to that ethnic group. What I used was actually weaving. Weaving is one of the most popular art forms. It could be used as baskets, it can use as blankets. And how I created the weaving picture, as you see right here, is actually you take an inch and you fold it upwards from the horizontal way, and then you cut slits going vertical across that horizontal fold to create what you can see is where the purple piece of paper was then weaving in and out. You'll go over and under to create that um, weave effect on that woven effect on the piece of paper. And also students could build upon it and actually build 4 more sides around it and create a basket as their visual representation if that was important to their ethnic group. There was actually drawings that they could have done. They could have done collages, or they could have painted if that was important to their ethnic group. But I wanted to show them with weaving was that it's an art form, but yet is a helpful tool, and it was a way of life for a lot of ethnic groups. But the example I used was the cavemen, where they actually did drawings upon the wall. Not only was this a form of communication, but it also told stories within that ethnic group. It was very important when someone went on a hunting adventure and came back with a nice kill, that it was then important to use everything of the buffalo, for example. That's one of the main animals that they hunted for, and they had to find different paints in order to do that. Well, back then they didn't have paint like we have today, so they had to find berries or nuts or grass to create that those different colors upon the wall. I thought this was important because it helps students relate to not only the ethnic group, but in today's time period, they get to see how different things that they actually can use for fun were actually really important to different ethnic groups and back in that time. In closing, what did the students actually learn? Well, they got to learn numerous things about conversion, about taking their inches to feet to yards and to miles, and they got to learn about how a consumer can be labeled primary or secondary consumer. The primary consumer is the one who initially feeds off the plant, and how they got to do this was through many hands-on activities. They got to label a plant, they got to create backdrops of ecosystems, and they got to create flowcharts and so many other things. And within the ELA part, they got to write their research paper and put those details in and put a little fun twist as being the polar bear in a different ecosystem. And it's just something different that the kids will actually remember forever, because you're not going to be a polar bear in a different ecosystem, let alone at a different point in time. And what the difference made in engaging was that was something fun, and you got to have parents there. They got to invited to come and listen, and they got to see their child's visual representations that they made. They got to come, and maybe some helped with those visual representations, and some actually donated But this was one of those units that the students could actually really be hands-on, whether it was musical or art or writing or giving a speech. They had so many opportunities to actually expand within this unit.